up to 70 participants, so maybe we can officially begin this meeting. Thank you everyone for joining us, as I've already said a few times. As you're aware, if you've been here the last 2 days, Dr. Laurent Sibelius, who's the head of the iStrategy, unfortunately couldn't make it. But we have quite a few other colleagues, both from the iStrategy, but also from wider WHE, that's the World Health Organization Emergencies Program. So we have Dr. Jorge Castilla Echenique, who is the acting head of Health Emergencies Intervention, who will be joining us, and also Dr. Pierre Formonti, who's the head of the High Impact Epidemics Unit. So thank you to colleagues for present today and sharing their wisdom. Let's see. During the program, my colleague Rakhi will be dropping in a link to a survey, which we would really like you to participate in and provide your inputs. It's a survey on a proposed twinning program. So the idea is that 2 countries can be paired up and they can learn from each other. And we would really like your help in shaping this program. So do take a few minutes out of your day to fill that in. That would be really helpful for us. Thank you. So let's begin with the program for the day. Over the first 2 days, we had presentations by the principals of WHO and Gavi, and today we have a video message from Dr. Ephraim Lemango, who's the principal advisor and chief of immunization at UNICEF, another one of the key partners of the iStrategy. So let's go on to the video.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. It's my great pleasure to join you today for the Eliminating Yellow Fever Epidemics Annual Partners Meeting. We at UNICEF are proud to be part of this critical and impactful partnership that exists to provide a global oversight, coordination, and support to local and regional efforts to detect and, most importantly, prevent yellow fever epidemics. Since I's inception in 2017, close to 200 million people have been protected against yellow fever in Africa. Despite the global challenge of COVID-19 pandemic, the I partnership was able to adopt in effective and innovative ways, maintaining delivery of life-saving yellow fever vaccines. The COVID-19 vaccine rollout is crucial for halting the devastating effects of the pandemic. However, we need to ensure continuity of essential vaccination to prevent diseases and outbreaks from vaccine-preventable diseases, including yellow fever. There is a great threat that our hard-earned gains can actually be wiped out unless and otherwise we endure to preserve these achievements. UNICEF has been working closely with partners, specifically the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, to allow for these priority countries, for instance, Nigeria and DRC, to proceed safely with their mass yellow fever vaccination campaigns despite COVID-19 pandemic. Additional resources have been provided to these countries to allow for them to obtain the necessary personal protective equipment and infection prevention control supplies to protect the healthcare workers delivering the vaccination, as well as vaccine recipients and their families. Through such joint efforts over 2020, 48 million people were protected against yellow fever in Africa. This was done through preventive and outbreak response campaigns despite COVID-19. In addition, the partnership has successfully increased the yellow fever vaccine supply globally. The iStrategy has also joined with Measles and Rubella Initiative partners to support rollout of integrated measles and yellow fever campaign, planning and advocating with governments about the importance of maintaining vaccinations amid the pandemic. UNICEF joins with the other I partners in advocating for sustained and improved routine immunization coverage to prevent yellow fever reemergence, especially in West Africa, as we aim to eliminate yellow fever epidemics by 2026. These efforts complement broader immunization strengthening efforts, such as those being undertaken through Immunization Agenda 2030 to restore and maintain essential immunization services and ensure no one is left behind from the benefits of vaccination. As of now, the EYE strategy supports 40 countries and involves more than 50 partners. Working together, we can definitely protect over 1 billion people from yellow fever in Africa and the Americas by 2026. Yellow fever cannot be eradicated, but surely we can eliminate yellow fever epidemics. Without the work of the Eliminating Yellow Fever Epidemic partners, yellow fever has the potential to again lead to devastating epidemics with international spread, as we saw it in 2016. We cannot let that happen. I repeat, we cannot let that happen on our watch. And if we work together, we can definitely prevent this from occurring. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lumango, for that video message. As you said, we cannot let that happen. I hope everybody on this call feels very proud of their work. Dr. Lumango mentioned 48 million people protected despite the pandemic. Those are some amazing numbers, and we really should all be very proud. Moving on, the first day of this meeting, we started with the global picture, and since then we've been refining it further and further. We had a look at the regions, we had a look at work in countries, the work of working groups, and today we're going to take that magnifying glass even further. The next presentation comes from WHO's own Dr. Marlies from our office in Cameroon, and she's going to present on yellow fever surveillance in Cameroon. Dr. Marlies' presentation is going to be in French, so all those who need to switch their interpretation should do so now. Thank you, Dr. Marlies, you have the floor.
Bonjour à tous et merci de me passer la parole pour partager l'expérience du Cameroun en ce qui concerne la surveillance épidémiologique. Et puisque nous sommes dans le domaine de la fièvre jaune, je pense que nous nous attarderons sur les aspects concernant les spécificités de la surveillance de la fièvre jaune. Donc, je suis Marlies Donsop, le NPO chargé de la surveillance au bureau OMS du Cameroun. Et notre présentation s'articulera autour des points suivants que nous aurons l'occasion de découvrir. Donc, nous pouvons passer à la diapo suivante. Slide, please. Alors, s'agissant du Cameroun, il faut dire que c'est un pays situé en Afrique un peu au-dessus de l'équateur. C'est un pays de 475 000 kilomètres carrés, avec une population estimée à peu près 27 millions d'habitants cette année 2021. Et pour ce qui concerne le programme élargi de vaccination, la population cible de 0 à 11 mois est d'environ 946 000 et les enfants de 0 à 9 mois représentent à peu près 4 260 000 habitants. Le climat est équatorial et tropical, rythmé par des saisons de pluie et des saisons sèches. Et le pays compte 10 régions administratives. Sur le plan sanitaire, ces régions administratives sont comparables au découpage sanitaire. Et le pays est divisé en 197 districts de santé, sachant que le district de santé est vraiment l'unité opérationnelle du système de santé. Et ces districts de santé sont divisés en à peu près 1812 aires de santé, qui sont des sous-districts à peu près, si on peut dire. Et le pays compte plus de 4000 formations sanitaires. À ce niveau, il y a une petite nuance parce qu'il y a des formations qui sont clairement formalisées et d'autres formations sanitaires qui sont clandestines. Qu'à cela ne tienne, dans les interventions de santé publique, on essaye de toucher toutes les formations sanitaires dès lors qu'elles accueillent notre cible. On peut passer à la diapo suivante. Diapo. Le système de surveillance s'appuie sur plusieurs piliers. Nous avons d'une part la surveillance intégrée de la maladie riposte et d'autre part la surveillance au cas par cas. Et l'avantage, c'est que tous ces systèmes ont des guides et des recueils qui sont harmonisés et le personnel est formé. C'est vrai, il y a des efforts à accomplir dans ce sens, mais les définitions de cas sont affichées dans pratiquement toutes les formations sanitaires du pays, les conduites à tenir également pour faciliter la surveillance. La surveillance est intégrée avec les autres maladies, en particulier la polio, la rougeole, la fièvre jaune, le tétanus néonatal et depuis quelque temps le Covid. Donc, toutes les maladies évitables par la vaccination bénéficient d'une surveillance intégrée qui se fait à une certaine fréquence. C'est une surveillance active avec des visites des sites de priorité. Et ça, c'est vraiment un héritage du programme de lutte contre la poliomyélite à ne pas négliger. Nous avons des points focaux à tous les niveaux pour cette surveillance. Et vous le verrez dans la diapo suivante. Et la surveillance, bien entendu, se fait également avec le laboratoire qui, nous avons la chance d'avoir à Yaoundé même, dans notre pays, un laboratoire de référence de niveau régional. Diapo. Slide. Donc, schématiquement, c'est représenté comme vous le voyez. Le système est pyramidal, notre système de surveillance est pyramidal avec à la base tous les districts de santé, les aires de santé et les acteurs qui s'y trouvent, notamment ces points focaux dont nous avons parlé, mais aussi la communauté. Au niveau intermédiaire, nous avons les régions et au niveau central, bien entendu, nous avons la direction de la lutte contre la maladie et le programme élargi de vaccination qui s'occupe spécifiquement de la fièvre jaune. Et bien entendu, l'Observatoire national de la santé publique également interagit avec les laboratoires et les partenaires. Diapo. Slide. Donc, pour ce qui concerne le circuit de l'information, c'est à peu près le même schéma. Vous verrez que nous partons en bas de la communauté qui rapporte l'information au niveau de la formation sanitaire et les formations sanitaires sont rattachées à des aires de santé qui rapportent au district de santé. Le district de santé lui-même rapportera au niveau intermédiaire qui est la région. Puis au niveau central, je parlais de la direction de la lutte contre la maladie et bien entendu les programmes spéciaux apparentés. Et pour ce qui nous concerne, il s'agit du programme élargi de vaccination. Donc, nous notons des interactions et surtout la notion de rétrofeedback dans ce schéma de ce circuit de l'information qui régit notre système. Diapo. C'est un système qui est mis en place depuis un certain temps, plus d'une dizaine d'années quand même. Il faut dire que le système a bénéficié du programme de lutte contre la polio et des financements qui allaient avec pour être mis en place. Et tout ça nous a permis d'obtenir quelques résultats que nous pouvons résumer ici. Diapo. Slide. Donc, ici, cette diapo présente la réalisation des visites de cible. Nous avons parlé tantôt de la surveillance active avec un déplacement des personnels de santé vers des autres services de santé pour effectuer la revue des registres pour voir s'il n'y a pas des cas qui auraient éventuellement été manqués. Et cette diapo présente la situation jusqu'à la 41e semaine de l'année 2021. Vous voyez qu'au total, nous avons 20 108 visites qui ont été réalisées et ça, c'est documenté à travers des outils électroniques parce qu'au cours des visites, il y a des formulaires électroniques qui sont renseignés et c'est ce qui nous permet de savoir d'objectiver la mise en œuvre de la visite. Bon, il est à déplorer quand même le fait que le taux de visite de ces sites reste faible par rapport à la fréquence qui est normalement définie. Donc, on est généralement autour de 40 et 50%, mais péniblement, nous dépassons les 50% au niveau national. Diapo. Slide, please. Et ça, c'est également une vue schématique qui nous montre de semaine en semaine le nombre de visites de sites qui est réalisé. Diapo. Ce sont des informations que nous suivons de semaine en semaine afin de rattraper là où c'est nécessaire. Diapo, please, slide. I just want to get it through. I just want to take advantage of that time. Please slide. OK. Et cette diapo nous montre les performances qui ont été enregistrées en 2020 et en 2021, par exemple. Et c'est pareil, ce sont des résultats, les courbes épidémiologiques. Et là, par exemple, nous voyons que jusqu'à présent, nous avons déjà, à travers le système de surveillance SIM-R, nous avons enregistré 1291 cas de fièvre jaune, cas suspects de fièvre jaune en 2021. Diapo. Comme nous l'avons dit, les deux systèmes sont complémentaires et vous remarquerez que à travers le système de surveillance au cas par cas, nous avons enregistré un peu moins. C'est vrai qu'on est passé rapidement sur la diapo, mais à travers ce système, nous avons 1110. Donc, c'est pour dire qu'il y a généralement quelques discordances et à travers les réunions d'harmonisation des données, j'ai dit les systèmes étaient complémentaires, nous arrivons parfois à rattraper des cas qui ont été captés par un système et pas par l'autre. Des fois aussi, nous n'y arrivons pas et ça fait partie des points à améliorer pour notre surveillance. Donc ça, ce sont les cas qui ont été confirmés en 2021. Diapo. Il faut dire que, à la diapo, please. Il faut dire qu'actuellement, au Cameroun, nous avons confirmé 24 cas de fièvre jaune depuis le début de l'année. Bon, ça, ce sont des cas confirmés soit par PRNT ou bien par séroneutralisation ou par PCR, 3 cas par PCR. Et les investigations ont eu lieu et nous sommes en train de préparer le plan de réponse. Diapo. Donc, diapo. Diapo. Cette diapo nous fait un peu ressortir les points forts de notre système que nous voulions relever. La surveillance passive et la surveillance active sont fonctionnelles dans notre pays à tous les niveaux. Il s'agit d'une surveillance intégrée des maladies évitables à la vaccination et nous avons des documents normatifs qui sont à jour. Le suivi est régulier, hebdomadaire, le suivi des données et des performances avec des rétrofeedbacks. Cependant, nous avons quelques points à améliorer. Par exemple, la mise en œuvre des visites de sites qui reste sous-optimale. La communication sur les enjeux de la surveillance et les définitions des cas doit être améliorée, surtout auprès des professionnels de la santé et des communautés. Parce que régulièrement, nous nous rendons compte que des professionnels reçoivent des cas suspects et malheureusement ne savent pas qu'il faut notifier ces cas ou alors ne savent pas comment le faire. Donc, nous sommes engagés dans de vastes actions de sensibilisation, de renforcement des capacités du personnel de santé. Il y a également l'archivage qui mérite d'être amélioré parce que nous avons parfois du mal à retrouver des données historiques. En termes d'opportunités, nous avons les appuis techniques et financiers des partenaires. Nous avons les financements du programme Polio qui ont largement contribué, qui constitue d'ailleurs la principale source de financement de la surveillance de la fièvre jaune. Et nous avons surtout cette présence du laboratoire de référence pas loin de chez nous, ce qui nous permet d'échanger régulièrement et surtout d'avoir des résultats ou des informations complémentaires en temps réel pratiquement. En termes de menaces, nous pouvons citer l'insécurité car notre pays fait face à une menace sécuritaire, à une crise sécuritaire et surtout la baisse des financements avec la transition polio qui est en cours. Diapo. En termes de perspective, nous devons riposter aux épidémies qui sont actuellement en cours. Et notre plan national d'élimination de la fièvre jaune est en voie d'être élaboré. Diapo. Quels sont les défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés? Nous devons absolument maintenir le niveau de priorité que la surveillance des maladies évitables par la vaccination a occupé jusque-là, dans un contexte épidémique assez chaud. Nous avons la pandémie de Covid qui touche le pays et beaucoup d'autres épidémies là, de rougeole, de polio même, parce que vendredi dernier, on nous a confirmé un cas de poliovirus dérivé du vaccin dans la région de l'Extrême-Nord. C'est dire que nous avons des conflits de priorité qui parfois mettent certaines activités au second plan. Le renforcement des capacités des acteurs pour une mise en œuvre optimale des activités de surveillance est un réel défi dans un contexte de ressources limitées. La surveillance à base communautaire également, c'est un défi dans ce contexte. Il faut dire que pas mal de cas restent en communauté et malheureusement sont découverts, parfois les situations sont découvertes lorsqu'elles sont déjà trop graves. Nous avons du mal à atteindre un certain nombre de zones, des zones enclavées, des zones à sécurité compromise. Nous avons des déplacés internes des populations spéciales dans le pays. Et comme je disais tantôt, le problème du financement de la surveillance est problématique dans un contexte où nous sommes en pleine transition polio. Donc, ça, c'était globalement posté le tableau de la surveillance, notre expérience du Cameroun. Et je voudrais vous remercier pour votre attention. Slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Marlies. Very interesting and detailed look at the surveillance that you have in place for yellow fever in Cameroon. I have a question for you. You described a few of the strengths of surveillance in Cameroon. Is that why we've seen an increase in the signals? You also showed us that you've had a greater number and greater spread of signals. So is it because the surveillance is better, or has there been an increase in the disease in the country, or some other reason? Could you help us understand? I don't see you, Dr. Marlies. Could you turn your camera and your microphone on? Thank you. So should I repeat the question? It was just to understand what is behind the increase in the signals.
Ok, si vous voulez, je peux y aller directement. Hein. Je pensais qu'on prendrait peut-être une série, mais bon, ça va. Juste pour dire que nous pensons réellement que l'augmentation des signaux traduit une situation épidémiologique qui s'est dégradée. Parce que par le passé, je ne sais pas si vous pouvez revenir à la diapo qui présente les indicateurs des 2 années successives. Allô? Vous m'entendez toujours? OK. Dans la présentation, yes. Il y a une diapo, la diapo 10, je pense, qui présente les indicateurs des 2 années successives, 20 et 21. En fait, il faut dire que c'est vrai, avec le temps, la surveillance s'améliore, mais elle n'était pas si mauvaise aussi par le passé. Il n'y a pas une différence très significative pour pouvoir attribuer cette détection des cas uniquement à une amélioration de la surveillance. La diapo 10, s'il vous plaît. Donc, nous pensons réellement que bien que la surveillance se soit améliorée, la détection de cas traduit plutôt une situation épidémiologique qui s'est dégradée. En 2020, il y a une autre diapo, vous verrez que par le passé, vous voyez, les indicateurs de surveillance étaient déjà ouverts en 2020. Le pourcentage de districts ayant investigué au moins un cas suspect, le taux d'investigation ils étaient déjà, il n'y a pas de différence significative de 2020 à 2021. Par contre, au niveau des trouvailles, en termes de cas positifs, on a une grande différence. Nous devons, en résumé, la situation, la surveillance s'améliore avec le temps, ça, il faut le reconnaître, mais ce seul fait n'est pas suffisant pour expliquer cette grande augmentation de la détection des cas et nous pensons que la surdétection que nous notons ces temps-ci est certainement liée à une dégradation de la situation épidémiologique, entre autres. Merci.
Thank you, Dr. Marlies. This is why your work is so important, surveillance, just to understand what's happening with the disease and where our efforts should be directed. We don't have too much time, but just one more question to you. You mentioned a bit about the zones which are hard to reach, that you have quite a few of them where you work. What are your strategies in place for disease surveillance in these areas with insecurity? Thank you.
OK, merci beaucoup. C'est vraiment un honneur pour moi de vous faire part des stratégies qui sont mises en place parce que nous avons une grosse innovation depuis 2020. Nous avons mis dans les régions du nord-ouest et du sud-ouest, nous avons mis en œuvre un projet de renforcement de la surveillance qui a porté ses fruits. Il faut dire que le nord-ouest et le sud-ouest sont en proie à une crise sécuritaire très grave avec de nombreux déplacés. C'est clairement la guerre dans ce pays, dans cette région, ces deux régions. Et même les populations locales sont en insécurité. Il y a des villes mortes, des gens sont allés vivre dans les pousses en pleine, même les campagnes sont inhabitées et l'insécurité est très forte. Du coup, le système de santé s'était pratiquement effondré depuis 2018. Et il y a eu des attaques des centres de santé, il y a eu des assassinats du personnel de santé. Vous comprenez que tout le monde était parti. Et jusqu'aujourd'hui, d'ailleurs, certaines de ces districts, des districts de ces régions restent inaccessibles. Qu'est-ce que nous avons fait? Nous avons recruté au niveau local des personnes locales, des ressources humaines locales qui n'étaient pas appelées à beaucoup se déplacer pour appuyer la mise en œuvre des visites de cytométrie. Parce que nous savons qu'il y a quand même des formations sanitaires qui restent fréquentées. Donc, nous avons commencé par ces visites de surveillance active pour voir si des cas suspects n'auraient pas échappé au système. Et donc, dans chaque district, il y a un agent qui, chaque semaine, en fonction du niveau de priorité, se rend dans des formations sanitaires prioritaires pour voir si des cas de fièvre jaune ne seraient pas passés au courant de la semaine. Et ça, c'était le premier axe d'entrée, c'était l'entrée du projet. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, nous prévoyons d'étendre notre action au niveau communautaire en trouvant en travaillant avec des ONG, en identifiant au sein des communautés des personnes focales que nous pourrions former et qui nous rapporteraient des informations en cas de maladie ou de signaux qui sont recherchés. À cet effet, le ministère de la Santé est également en train d'implanter dans ce type de zone, pas seulement au nord-ouest et au sud-ouest, une surveillance basée sur les événements. Et avec le système EWAS, les smartphones sont remis aux communautaires et ils sont formés et en cas de signaux, il y a des événements pour lesquels qu'ils doivent notifier une fois qu'ils les détectent dans la communauté et ensuite le personnel plus qualifié descend sur le terrain pour confirmation de l'événement ou de la maladie. Donc ça, c'était pour la région du nord-ouest et du sud-ouest. Il faut dire que l'extrême nord également est concerné par la crise de Boko Haram. Et à ce niveau également, nous avons implémenté le projet Abada. C'était pour la polio initialement, mais avec le temps, la masse critique de plus de 650 relais communautaires que nous avions formés, nous avons étendu leur domaine d'action, leur spectre d'action à toutes les maladies évitables par la vaccination. Au-delà de ça, il y a des intensifications de la surveillance et il y en a une d'ailleurs qui est prévue à la fin de ce trimestre. Et bien évidemment, toutes les activités classiques de surveillance qui sont renforcées en fonction du niveau de priorité ou de la performance de la surveillance dans les districts. Merci. À vous.
Thank you, Doctor. It's one thing to save lives, but it's a whole other thing to be fighting for your own life while you do that. So thank you. You and your colleagues have all our respect, and we're really sorry to hear that some health workers lost their lives. I see there's a question for you in the Q&A, but we've run out of time. So maybe you could just respond directly in the Q&A box. That would be great. Thank you. We have to move on with the next.
Shagun, sorry to interrupt. We have Dr. Blaise, who is our regional yellow fever contact in the African continent, who wishes to just address a point by Dr. Marlies. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's important we let him speak. Apologies.
No, that's fine. Please go ahead, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations to Dr. Marlies, who has presented the situation in Cameroon. I just want to add on what Marlies said, according to the question which was raised, asking what can be the reason of augmentation of signals reported from Cameroon. I just come from Cameroon, where we were in the program of investigation around the notified cases and confirmed cases in Cameroon. And up to now, the investigation is not yet concluded in some of the areas, but from the few of the area where investigation were conducted, I can summarize that Cameroon falls under the situation of other countries in West Africa, where preventive mass vaccination campaign are completed countrywide, but nowadays we have starting seeing confirmed cases resulting in those countries. In the same case in Cameroon. Lastly, Cameroon just notified almost 20 confirmed cases in different districts in Cameroon. So some of the reason on which we can explain this situation, I can highlight first the situation of routine immunization. The routine immunization coverage is still low in some countries, not only in countries, but the country can submit globally a very good routine immunization coverage. But when you go to the subnational level in some districts, the routine immunization coverage is really very critical. And you will get that in those areas, the routine immunization coverage is still very low, which is one of the reasons we have started facing resurgence of some confirmed cases in those areas. Secondly, the situation in Cameroon, we have security issues in far north region of the Cameroon and the northwest region of Cameroon. And this situation has pushed to a very huge population movements from the country to other areas and from other areas to the country. When I talk about, for example, I talk about the far north region, which is bordering Chad, and Chad up to now is not yet covered by preventive mass vaccination campaign. This brings a threat of spread of yellow fever, maybe from Chad to the country. And the other situation, these regions are bordering Nigeria in the area where vaccination is not yet conducted and in a security area. So these population movements is one of the factors which is bringing to have many yellow fever cases detected in Cameroon and increase of the number of signal coming from this country. So this population movement, people are going around the country from the insecurity areas up even to the big cities. So this is a treat that we can, I can just add on what my colleague Marlies just said right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Blaise. Very important points on the challenges of this work, and I think also the lessons that are to be learned and shared among countries. So thank you for your inputs on that. Moving on, in the interest of time, we have Dr. Daniela Garone from the MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, who's going to talk to us about a path-breaking mechanism, that's the International Coordinating Group, or the ICG mechanism, that brings vaccines where they're needed very quickly. Dr. Garone, please, you have the floor. And please, for the others, the participants, do drop in your questions in the Q&A box so we can discuss them with our presenter after. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Shagun, can you confirm that you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic. Last time was difficult. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to present an overview of the ICG, the International Coordination Mechanism, Coordination Groups Mechanism in yellow fever outbreak response. I am presenting on behalf of the ICG group. Next one. So the ICG for yellow fever facilitates the provision of rapid access to global emergency stockpile of vaccines to support as a strategy in outbreak response. In 2020, there were 6 requests of yellow fever vaccines approved by the ICG, and 3 of the 6 requests has been in the month of December. So both yellow fever cases and outbreaks in the past year were mainly re-emerging of outbreaks in the Western Africa and more related to intense transmissions in the broad geographical area around late 2020. And what we highlight is that the viral transmission in the outbreak supported by ICG were impacted beyond the area of the outbreak and more impact in the border areas and the mobile populations who were more at risk. And ICG made some recommendations to increase the coverage of vaccination in Western Senegal and Guinea and Uganda related to some requests during these years. Next one. So if you can see in the period September 2020 to August 21, so we hold our ICG meetings in September 21. So we report the previous year from September to August. There were the 6 countries supported were Senegal, Guinea, Nigeria, South Sudan, Uganda, and Ethiopia, but there were risk of outbreaks in Mali, Burkina, Central African Republic, Cameroon, and Congo. And there were some isolated cases in Cote d'Ivoire and Niger, and not in the rest of the countries. So I think we discussed it in the last 3 days much about this. Next one. So why do we need a stockpile? So first of all is as an epidemic response, vaccination in outbreak response is well demonstrated in yellow fever, meningitis, measles, cholera, polio, and Ebola. And the second main point is the unpredictability in the demand when it's coming an outbreak. So there is a need for an immediate availability, and there is supply shortages and buffer stock, especially on cholera and IPV. So the stockpile was created through the ICG mechanism in 91, I think, and since then it was created because of shortages of vaccines supplies, and to have the capacity to have vaccines for emergency response. And those who created the ICG didn't expect that this will be maintained, but still shortage of vaccines for emergency response are unfortunately continuing. Next one. So at the moment we are having 4 stockpiles for meningococcal, yellow fever, cholera, as well as in Ebola. As therefore, there are 4 ICG groups, specific groups dedicated for handling the stockpile. Next one. So who we are? So we are a solution-minded group of people who are decision makers, and the decisions are being made by consensus. So the 4 members of the ICG is the International Federation of the Red Cross, MSF, Medicine Sans Frontières, UNICEF, and WHO. So each organization has 2 members, and each organizations are well involved in both in prevention on outbreak response, and with a role of presence of Gavi in all of our ICG members groups. Next one. So the main objective of the ICG is to ensure rapid access to vaccines, and included injectable materials, and in some for meningitis is including also ceftriaxone, and to optimize the use of the limited resources in a very coordinated way, and as well as coordinate all the interagency efforts in preparing for and responding to epidemics. So including all the additional components of vaccinations, which is the syringes and all the materials needed, the PPE for a vaccination campaign, and the support on the preparation of the request, as well as the implementation and the report. Next one. So the stock management is the storage is under UNICEF supply division, and preferable we have the stockpile in the manufacturer's warehouse in many of the places, but in 2 sites with rapid access to quicker delivery, with clear and a close monitoring on the shelf life and the rotation of the stock to be able to utilize it, and is located with injectable materials in Copenhagen. So you can see this, the target is the vaccine should be ready in 48 hours and 5 days of shipping. Next one. So looking at the process, so from the request that's coming from the country, many times in the request is involved all the technical partners at country level, as a regional level, and we support. There is a circulation to the ICG Secretariat 1 day, and we have 2 days to give our deliberate, to have deliberations and to have a position, whether an approval or requesting for, more information, or a partially approval, or a rejection, and the reasons for what each of the decisions. And if there is a consensus, then we have a consensus decision. Otherwise, we will make a decision to have a conversation around our concerns, and then we have a decision made, and in 7 days the vaccine should be delivered to the country. Next one. So an overview of the vaccines supported through the ICG since 2016-2020. We have supported 9 countries, and here are Angola, Brazil, Nigeria, Congo, South Sudan, Uganda, Guinea, Senegal, and Ethiopia. It has been requested 68 millions and has been approved 56 millions in these countries. So you can see what are most of the requests are approved or partially approved, and not approved. There were only 3 requests. Next one. So when the period 2020-21, so we say there are 6 approved. The total request has been 6 countries and 3 countries, and we fully approve Nigeria, Senegal, and Guinea, and partially, well, we partially approved Senegal. So a total of a total of 4 millions has been approved, and 5.1 million has been requested. Next. So as ICG, we do have a key performance indicators that we're monitoring. So the targets are, since the outbreak confirmations to the request submission, we expect to have 7 days, and we have 32 in the last year, and this is the delays at the country level to prepare submissions. The second target is the circulation on 1 day, and the approval or the decision, communication on the decision for the ICG is 2 days, and we have in total achieved these indicators with 1.6 days for a decision by the ICG. And vaccine arrival in the country, the target is 7 days, and we had 6.3 days, so within the target. And the start of the campaign after the vaccine is arriving in the country is 10 days, and we have 37 days. We will talk about a little bit on the challenges, both in the preparation of the request as well as the implementation of the campaign. Next one. So what the lessons learned of this year is, number 1 is the late submission of the vaccination request. Though the submissions has been of a better quality with an improved epidemiological overview and rationale for the strategic, the strategy, the vaccination strategy, and the rationale of the proposals. And that shows that there is a better coordination and consultation process with technical partners involved at the national level as well as the regional level. That make much easier the fast track of the approval when all the information are within the request. The shipments has been within the targets, and the approval for ICG has been within the targets, and what we see a late implementation of the campaigns. One key factor has been last year is all the COVID-19 impacts has delayed all first investigation and diagnosis, and having sufficient epidemiological data to develop a strategy of vaccination, which is a key component of the ICG request. And the ICG application and implementation of the response has been delayed because of COVID. And there is also an increase in observed decreased number of suspected cases investigated and tested during 2020. And the last component is the after vaccination reported has been frequently delayed. And we have some improvements, but I think this is an area that should be addressed in the future. Next. So the ICG recommendation, the meeting in September 21, has recommended that the vaccine stockpile is maintained at 6 million to be available at all time and during for emergency request. And the other recommendation is about improving the training or technical support for the development of the ICG request in a way that the request is having all the critical information that needed for members to approve it, to fast track approval. And this is probably, there is a need of a coordination of the resources in country in terms of availability of epidemiological data or using data from another organizations working in response. Next one. And this is an important aspect that will be discussed in the future, is that 50% of the outbreaks that has been supported by ICG in 21, late 2020 and 21 were in countries where yellow fever vaccine is part of the routine immunization program, and with and countries with preventive vaccination campaigns, whether they were previous vaccination campaigns or ongoing. And this is triggered a question that is a long standing question on what is the best criteria, what is the best strategy in these places and for approval of emergency requests or to boost immunization campaigns, especially in urban areas, and what additional sources of information could be used to better trigger the campaign strategies. And the last point is the ICG has highlighted the need to continue supporting the investigations and identify factors that delay the laboratory confirmation of yellow fever cases, which is a condition to trigger ICG request and development on a strategy around outbreak control with vaccines. Next, thank you very much for your time, and I hope we have time for questions. I have my Michel is with me, so he will help me to answer any question that is from previous years.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniela. Very interesting presentation, also sobering to see all the effect of COVID and the other delays that are perhaps something that we really need to focus on. And on that, we have a question. And I know you mentioned you have colleagues online as well, so I invite Dr. Salim and the other colleague you mentioned to also join in if they would like to comment. We have a question, which is, what is being done to improve the time of the country emergency response after receiving the vaccine? So from vaccination to once the vaccines arrive, how can we start campaigns quicker?
I don't know, maybe, or Jennifer, probably, or somebody from...
Yeah, a quick response from our part is the sense that the role of ICG, the role of ICG is to approve a request. Then once it is in the country, it's in the hand of the Ministry of Health. So it's very difficult to ICG to have a role of even of advising the Ministry of Health. It's more the role of the local partner, the local WHO, UNICEF local, eventually MSF if it's present in the country, to help the ministry to implement the campaign. But it's not the role of the ICG to supervise, I would say, the use of the vaccine inside the country.
Right, thank you. So this is maybe a question for the broader group, but why don't you introduce yourself?
Maybe in addition to Michel, what we see and the request, and this is very used very often, is a feedback we give to the countries, is that when we see that the proposal for the implementation campaign is lacking some realistic time frame. So we help to, we promote that in-country collaboration to be able to implement the campaign timely, because that's what's really save life, So this is a message to all Ministry of Health.
Yeah, vaccines need to reach the people to save lives.
Exactly.
Dr. Daniela, would you introduce your colleague who just spoke? I don't know if everybody got there.
Yes. Michel van Erp. He's a long-standing ICG member for yellow fever.
Thank you, Michelle, for your words.
Yeah.
One perhaps question, maybe this is more for ICG, which is, what are the provisions for non-Gavi countries? I understand this is a mechanism that's funded by Gavi. So are there any plans or provisions for countries that aren't covered by Gavi?
Will not be ICG.
Okay, maybe I can step in this
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, no, you know that the provision for the vaccine is open for any countries, either it is Gavi eligible or not. The vaccine will be available for any country who is experiencing outbreak. So the country can request for the vaccine. The component is the operational cost. Gavi eligible countries, they get support from Gavi for the operational cost, but the non-Gavi eligible countries, they don't get support. So the campaign implementation, the operational cost should be ensured by the host country that, okay, yes, we are ready to implement the campaign, but we need the vaccine. So that is the provision for Gavi and non-Gavi eligible countries. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you also for all the facts in the chat, very useful and interesting facts. So thank you for that. And please continue the discussions in the other presentations, but we'll move on now. Thank you, Daniela, again for your presentation.
Thank you very much for giving us the space.
Thanks. So from the ICG mechanism, now we move on to another very interesting and very important topic, actually. I've been told maybe the most important topic, which is on the threat posed by urbanization, growing urbanization in urban areas on yellow fever control and elimination. So presenting today, we have Dr. Peter Mbonji from WHO's side, and he's going to talk about some guidelines on urban yellow fever risk that are in the works. Over to you, Doctor.
Well, good afternoon. Okay, let us move through. My name is Peter Mbonji, Dr. Mbonji. I'm sitting as Health Emergencies Officer at a Secretariat in WHO headquarters. And I'm going to talk about building resilience in urban center through the development of preparedness, readiness, and response plans. Slides, please. So following a brief introduction, we'll go through the objectives, then the rationale about the whole work, the scope of implementation process so far by the A Secretariat. We will then go into the urban resilience components and see how their core elements should be organized. And finally, we will raise some perspectives and way forwards and also conclude. Slides, please. Well, yellow fever, as we know, is an acute viral disease of human and other primates. And to date, we count 3 forms, which are symptomatic, intermediate, and urban, which is actually the form that would put emphasis on. As we know, Urban yellow fever is mainly transmitted by a vector, and it is an endemic disease in tropical areas of Africa and Central and South America. In 2018, WHO called for a global strategy to eliminate yellow fever with the three main objectives of protecting population at risk, preventing international spread, and countering outbreak rapidly. Slides, please. So the objective of this presentation now will be to understand, first of all, the urban resilience for yellow fever, and to describe the technical guidelines to develop preparedness, readiness, and response plans. We will then end by identifying priority area of support to countries for implementation of yellow fever urban resilience plans. Slides, please. So the rationale about this is quite clear. First of all, the existence of a wildlife reservoir makes yellow fever almost impossible to fully eradicate, as we may need to eradicate part of the fauna of the concerned regions. Furthermore, the high risk of international spread makes yellow fever a threat to global health security. And on the other hand, we have the rapid urbanization. That means an increasing risk of wide propagation with a risk of large urban outbreaks of yellow fever. However, as we know that yellow fever is preventable by vaccination and vector control, we then know that outbreaks can be eliminated if detected early, if it is anticipated or responded efficiently. When we observe in the recent history of yellow fever outbreaks, there was this outbreak in Angola in 2016 that highlighted the limits of preparedness and readiness to respond to large-scale yellow fever epidemics in urban settings. Slides, please. So whatever they are at high, moderate, or potential risk to face yellow fever outbreaks in their urban centers, countries should be prepared to respond to yellow fever urban outbreaks by developing active preparedness, readiness, and response plans. Slides, please. This is also a recommendation from the A strategic plan in its objective 2 to prevent international spread by building resilient urban centers, and its objective 3, which is contain outbreak rapidly by strengthening early detection, timely vaccine supply, and immediate response to outbreaks. Slides, please. So in the past, the A partnership has been very active, and only the last year, despite of the COVID outbreak, major achievements were done, especially on the global engagement and coordination, where development of decision-making principles and SOPs to inform global vaccine allocation for preventive mass campaign vaccination was developed. Then there was also a successful leverage of a partnership to procure critical PPE for vaccination campaign. And in the same set, the virtual annual A partners meeting was also organized with about 215 participants from 44 countries. Another point of the global engagement and coordination is a Gavi application from 4 countries, namely Sudan, Uganda, Nigeria, and Republic of Congo, and was endorsed by the Independent Review Committee. So as regards risk analysis and surveillance, an update yellow fever surveillance standards with renewed emphasis on detailed clinical, epidemiological, and vaccination history was produced. And then endorsement also of the National Risk Assessment Tool for yellow fever in Africa was done. Lastly, on the laboratory diagnosis area, there has been the endorsement of a 3rd regional reference laboratory in Africa, which is the Centre Pasteur of Cameroon. And also, there was also a yellow fever surveillance data management and laboratory workshop that was organized in Uganda with the participation of 34 countries, including regional and global partners. Many other elements of the laboratory was organized, including the shipment of over 1,000 samples facilitated by the AOPS for 13 countries. Slides, please. So the ongoing process of the air partnership plan for 2021, plan for 2021 includes tackling the resurgence of yellow fever in West Africa by characterizing and addressing immunity gaps and proposing appropriate risk mitigation approaches, increase surveillance capacities, strengthen routine immunization to prevent re-emergence, improving monitoring and evaluation and impact to track and measure impact at country level. And then there was also the country training and mentoring, which is to encourage interregional and inter-country collaboration. And lastly, there is the mitigate of urban risk by developing plan for detecting and responding to yellow fever urban outbreaks. Slides, please. So, slides, please. As regards the components of yellow fever urban resilience, three main components were listed, namely preparedness, which is to ensure that systems and plans are in place at a national level for detecting an outbreak early and implement an effective response. The second component, major component, is readiness, which is about making sure that we have all the necessary means available to implement systems and plans. And then the third one is about response, including recovery, which is about implementing systems and plans to respond to an outbreak and get health situation back to normal. Slides, please. So these components all cover 9 core elements that are listed in these slides. As the leadership and coordination first, which includes also coordination of partners and resource mobilization. There is a risk assessment, surveillance elements, and vector control, case management, communication and community engagement, continuity of services, and monitoring and evaluation of the response. Slides, please. As regards leadership and governance, which is the first component, there are 4 main actions that have been raised. First of all, there is a need to tackle emergency operations center and incident management system. So we have tried to describe it first on what it should be in preparedness plan, what it should be in readiness, and at the response plan level. Planning level. So the emergency, the EOC and IMS should be well described, especially in terms of structuration, functioning mechanism during the preparedness phase. And then we need to make sure that all these requirements for EOC and IMS functioning are available on the readiness phase. And then for the response is just to set, activate and implement the EOC and the IMS. The second major action for leadership and governance is about legal regulatory requirements for implementation action. So there is a need, first of all, to develop, if they are not, legal regulatory and requirement for implementation of yellow fever to make sure that those requirements are available and to ensure compliance of the response plans activities with those requirements. Slides, please. So slides, please. Yeah. So again, the third action point for leadership and government, leadership and coordination is about coordination of stakeholders, which includes technical and financial partners. So for each of the component, meaning preparedness, readiness, and response, we need to make sure that first of all, the network of appropriate partners is identified and set. And then that all the mechanisms for partners coordination are in place. Then during the response, there will be a need for development of a collaboration framework and the coordination as well of partners support and engagement. So the last action point for leadership and coordination is about resource mobilization. And we count in resource all the human, financial, material, infrastructures, and so on. So for the preparedness, there will be a need for mapping of all the resources needed in case of yellow fever outbreaks. Also making sure that human resources are well skilled and that SOPs for resource mobilization, especially financial and infrastructural mobilization, are in place. Then for the response, we'll have the mechanism for resource mobilization. Slides, please. So as regard risk assessment, as regard risk assessment, there is a need to understand exposition of the population as a major step for protection. One main action comes out. One main action comes out is about mapping of areas of vulnerability. So during the preparedness phase, there will be a need to draft the status of the major components of yellow fever control, meaning surveillance, vaccination, and so on. And then to classify the urban areas according to the outbreak risk of yellow fever, including the epidemics history and so on. So the readiness will be about mapping the vulnerability by level, the areas by level of vulnerability. Then we will have also this assessment during the response process as contextual background, situation analysis, and then extended investigation, report from extended investigation of confirmed case. Slides, please. And the next component is surveillance. Surveillance is a continuous process or cross-cutting process going from the preparedness to the response. So also for surveillance, we have 4 main action points. The first one being epidemiological surveillance, which in the preparedness phase, we will make countries make sure that they have case definition. They will develop norms for epidemiologic surveillance, including hospital or health facility-based surveillance and community-based surveillance, that they have a set of data collection and sharing mechanism. They have set a data collection and sharing mechanism. So all those tools to implement this should be available and make sure that they are available from the readiness plan. And then the response will then implement through the data collection and sharing situational report and developing other information products. The second action point for these elements of surveillance is about entomological and vector surveillance. So it's very important to make sure that principle of entomological surveillance, including monitoring, of vector density and distribution, is available, and that we have enough skilled HR to do the epidemiological surveillance. So guiding principle for entomological surveillance should be available, and we need to make sure that the database is built to keep those data. Slides, please. So the third action point of the surveillance will be the laboratory surveillance, which we should make sure that all the characteristic for the lab is set. And then we also need to make sure that we have protocols for sample manipulation, so that during the response, we will have a lab network which is set in a cross-cutting analysis of lab data with AP data. The last point for surveillance to be developed is the point of entry, where we will also develop different elements for preparedness, including the listing the international health regulation requirements, making sure that SOPs are available for surveillance at the point of entries. And during the outbreak, we should necessarily making sure that implementation of international health regulation is effective at point of entry, and that all the point of entries are well equipped with different protocols for its efficient functioning. Slides, please. So the fourth element of these components is the vaccination, which is actually one of the key elements in the response, which is actually the key elements of its response. So vaccination campaign should, yes, I said vaccination campaign excuse me, I just got a bit confused by entering message. So vaccination campaign should start with the preparedness through routine immunization and mass campaign vaccination strategies identified. So we have to draft a communication plan, work out logistics, and monitoring the vaccination activities. So for the readiness plan, we need to make sure that the vaccines deployment plans and resources are available, and organizing drills may also be an asset. We'll talk about drills a bit later. So for the response, we have to set the plan for a reactive vaccination campaign now, and then according to the situation or the need, plan for an alternate campaign with fractional dose. Slides, please. So following vaccination, we have vector control, which is the second key elements for the response to yellow fever outbreaks. And we need to make sure that vector control measures are taken and implemented. But to be there, we need to go through preparedness of these implementation of these measures, and have a mapping of vector distribution in risk areas, define vector characteristic, and develop appropriate set of measures that can guide mosquito and larval control actions. The readiness should make sure that the readiness plan should make sure that resources are available for vector monitoring and control, including human resources. And then during the response, there will be a need to conduct extended entomological investigation and to implement measures for vector control. Slides, please. So the last one is case management. Case management will consider diagnosis and case management, clinical diagnosis and case management. And we need to make sure that protocols are developed and implemented. Slides, please. Then we have risk communication and community engagement, where we need to make sure that community are informed and educate. The population is informed and educated about yellow fever prevention, about yellow fever risk, and they should be fully committed or engaged in the response process. Slides, please. Then we have continuity of service of services at two levels of action. One is the access of health to health services, so making sure that all the components are strengthened enough to allow access to other health services while there is an outbreak. And then the second point of action is continuity of healthcare by making sure that we put in place mechanisms for follow-up of cases, especially lost cases, and also a mechanism for home and community care. Slides, please. Then lastly, we have monitoring and evaluation plan, which will be developed with a framework and implemented during the response action. Slides, please. So now we are going to move to the perspective and way forward. We are almost at the end. So the perspective stands on accelerating implementation of the operational phase by, first of all, providing technical and financial support to countries to develop urban resilience plan, to strengthen capacities for surveillance in urban areas, to strengthen vaccine supply and increase vaccination coverage in urban areas, and then to enforce effective implementation of IHR at point of entry. Slides, please. The second main perspective to accelerate the implementation of the operational phase is to organize a simulation exercise in countries to assess the system in place and increase the level of readiness for yellow fever outbreaks. So there are two major simulation exercises. First of all, in high-risk countries, we can have a full-scale simulation exercise, and then in potential risk, in countries with potential risk of outbreak, we can go for a tabletop simulation exercise. However, as this full-scale simulation exercise is very expensive, we can still also opt for a drill simulation, which is now focusing on one aspect or one component. One component which is very interesting to have as a drill simulation is vaccination, because we can then test the timely allocation and acquisition and deployment of vaccines during urban outbreak. Slides, please. And this can be very helpful as it can lead to effective preventive mass campaign. Slides, please. So in conclusion, we can say that yellow fever remains a real threat in urban areas, especially in African countries, and that developing and implementing preparedness, readiness, and response plan is key to prevent and efficiently eliminate yellow fever outbreaks. Slides, please. Then we now know that we need to accelerate implementation of yellow fever. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Peter, for that detailed explanation of what it takes to respond and prepare for yellow fever in urban areas. There is already a question for you, but I'll ask us to hold off on the questions. We have one more presentation on urban areas, and that's by Dr. Frederick Zielig from the Global Vector Hub. Hi there. Who's going to talk to us about vector surveillance and control in urban settings. And once the presentation is done, we'll return to the questions. So please keep them coming if you have any. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Frederick Zielig. I'm the Partnerships Manager for the Global Vector Hub. And could I please have the first slide of my presentation? Thank you. So, as indicated, this is very much an expansion of the previous talk about improving preparedness by really improving the vector surveillance and vector control in urban settings to really inform the yellow fever urban outbreak response. So we at the Global Vector Hub, we are based at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, together with our colleagues at Arctech Innovation, had been tasked by the Eliminate Yellow Fever Epidemic Secretariat to conduct this in-depth study on the vector surveillance and control response in an urban setting. And while we're still finalizing the report, we thought this annual partners meeting would be a good opportunity to present some preliminary findings. So the next slide, please. So as it has become clear, the threat of yellow fever outbreaks continues to affect countries in Africa and the Americas. And surveillance and control of the vectors of yellow fever has an important contribution to make to outbreak responses, and especially in urban areas. And here, the main vector is Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito. So what we did for this study is that we first performed a review of available literature and then identified and interviewed stakeholders in the field. We consulted with them to characterize best practices, recommendations for yellow fever vector control, but also we asked them to identify and highlight any gaps in knowledge and capacity. So the next slide, please. So in terms of capacity gaps and preparedness gaps, the major gaps were really in terms of the lack of knowledge about vector behavior and vector ecology, which has quite significant implications for any control strategies, but also significant lack in capacity, lack of trained personnel, lack of funding and logistics, but also many stakeholders interviewed highlighted the lack of knowledge on the disease and the disease vectors in the community. So how is yellow fever transmitted, by which vectors, how does it differ from malaria, which is also very common. And in terms of recommendations, there's really very commonly featured was to improve the collaboration among stakeholders, improve the education and training, and thereby improving the capacity. Also establish surveillance and sentinel sites to really catch yellow fever in circulating in the vector population very early on, and also improve research funding. The next slide, please. So in terms of the recommendations that we made, those are aligned with the WHO's Global Vector Control Response 2017 to 2030. And I can only emphasize that this is such a fundamental document for the global vector community that it should really be central to any interventions and strategies. So really, we recommend to integrate Aedes surveillance and control with ongoing malaria control programs, which are very well established in many countries, particularly now in East Africa in the context of the emerging urban malaria vector Anopheles stevensii, which has a very similar ecology and bionomics as Aedes vectors do. So this can be really, could result in very great synergies. As was indicated in the previous presentation, establish a data sharing system between countries to link vector surveillance also with epidemiological data from human case surveillance, and organize opportunities for stakeholder collaboration and really engaging multi-sectoral sectors and really reaching out to communities and groups that haven't been reached yet. Next slide, please. So we also made recommendations really specific in an urban setting, what sort of interventions countries should conduct depending on their level of economic means. So there's a lot of text to take on here. So just go through it briefly, and you can see all the information shown here also on the SharePoint folder, and also the poster that we've also presented, which also includes all this information. So essentially, we're recommending that countries with high economic means should really carry out routine yellow fever vector surveillance and integrate this into broader arbovirus surveillance plans. Any data on the bionomics of the vector should inform models that assess and predict the community risk for yellow fever transmission. And outbreak response vector surveillance should really be able to identify hotspots for rapid response. Further on, community-based environmental management, such as solid waste management and water container management, should be focus. Moving on to modest economic means, these should focus on using sentinel surveillance used for tracking of disease risk. And they should also focus on the assessment of the risk of disease spread in relation to key hubs, such as transportation hubs, movement of population, but also taking vector density into account. And this should really also include municipal efforts, including local assessments of the ecology of Aedes larvae and pupae, so the immature stages, to target the most productive habitats for these vectors. And here the key focus should really be on community mobilization. And countries with low economic means should really focus, if possible, on surveillance that might be limited to outbreak response, but should identify very quickly the location of infections, again, using traps at sentinel sites and test mosquitoes for yellow fever at regional centers, and focus on a bottom-up approach coupled with insecticide use. And again, using regional data to leverage for the selection of appropriate intervention tools. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Frederick. Very interesting findings from your research, useful to many of us here. Let's go on to the questions, after which we'll have a short break, so we don't have too much time. But I would love to invite Dr. Celestina Obiekea. She's left a comment on PCR testing being part of I suppose this is on the urban yellow fever guidelines, so that we should include PCR testing at the national level. So I invite her to talk a bit about her thoughts on this. Dr. Celestina, would you turn on your camera and mic and just address your comment to us directly? I see Dr. William has, Dr. William, are you speaking about this?
Yes, about second to the last presentation on the core elements of the response. That's where I want to go.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, and then if Dr. Celestina wants to come online, we'll have her on afterwards. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, once more, my name is Nwachukwu William, and again, I lead the Nigeria Yellow Fever Technical Working Group. I want to thank Dr. Peter for his elaborate presentation on the 9 core elements. And in fact, that is that's the summary of all that we do in yellow fever. However, some of these activities come up, but they are not stepped down to the national levels. Most of the things dictated, even though we do them, we do not have the required support from the higher level, that is the WHO, except when we request. But I think that there should be a sort of routine way of stepping down these activities so that the national and the subnational will benefit. Then in the area of monitoring and the evaluation, Nigeria conducted the yellow fever simulation exercise in 2018, and it was really rich. That was supported by the WAHU. So I think doing this from time to time will also help us to identify more of the gaps that we may encounter, and that will also help in improving the response, the preparedness, and other things. And also the issue of after action review meeting. It should be also incorporated into the monitoring and evaluation framework for yellow fever. I remember that in 2019, we had after action review meeting, and it brought out a lot of issues. And of course, that after action review meeting was at, the participants were from different stakeholders, academics and states and other people, other good stakeholders for yellow fever. I am of the opinion that it should be enshrined into the core elements. This is, that is all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. William. Peter, would you respond? But hope we can make it quick. I think we have quite a few questions to go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Segun. Thank you, Dr. William, for the comments. I think it was mostly contributions than questions. As regards the support from the higher level, what I can say is that the plan has just been developed. It's even we are even finalizing it. So, and actually, that's why at the end of the presentation, we are talking about now the next steps or the way forwards about supporting countries to develop plans and implement them. So I think this request of the higher level of WHO and so on support is well noted to step down the activities. As regards the M&E, I mean, yeah, the simulation exercise is well appreciated. I read the report and it was really rich. And we are going to include, actually it's included in the documents, but we are going to include it again to make sure it completes the after action review meeting, which is obviously very interesting because it has also helped directing all the other outbreaks that we are coordinating. So that's it. I don't think there was more question than that. I think I've covered Dr. Williams' queries.
Thank you, Peter. I see we have Celestina, Dr. Celestina, who had a comment on PCR testing. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Segun. Apologies, I had some audio issues. So I just wanted to make a comment, you know, based on Dr. Peter's presentation as well, the part about laboratory diagnosis and improving lab testing, just to make a note on the inclusion of PCR, which gives faster turnaround. So currently most of the labs do serology with the PRNT for confirmation, which is part of the reasons why we have delayed turnaround time for testing, because the PRNT procedure is time intensive on its own, coupled with the time for shipments to the regional reference lab. So all of the data has shown that, you know, the delay points really are around the sample transportation from the national labs to the RRLs, and then the time it takes to actually get the PRNT test done. In some cases, it might take up to 10 to 12 days. So PCR, or including molecular testing, is actually a very sure way to reduce turnaround time for testing. And I know that part of the strategies of the work that has been done in the last 1 year plus, is also to see how to bring countries to incorporate PCR international testing to reduce that turnaround time to faster laboratory diagnosis. And I know that the I strategy has been supporting some countries. Their training has been planned, and part of the support from Gavi, the Gavi support also includes provision of PCR test kits. I know the Altona has been provisionally recommended for use. So I thought it would have been good to note that as part of, you know, the strategies to also improve the I strategies. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Celestine. On that point has been made time and again over the last 2 days. I'm sure Dr. Peter agrees. Peter, do you have anything to add?
No, I think she has made the point, and as you rightly said, it has been already developed, and I think she is totally right. That and I know that some countries have even started proceeding so. No, I think it's a very good comment or input, and we're also trying to put emphasis on that and to advocate for this. Thank you.
I see we have some hands up. One is Jean-François Lemaire. Would you like to come in here? From the lab side. Yes,
yes,
go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just a point that I would like to clarify. Yes, indeed, the molecular testing and the PCR can help improving turnaround time, but it's not a replacement for serologic tests and confirmatory serologic tests such as the PRNT. As I mentioned yesterday in my presentation, we have a biphasic presentation where we have the virological content that is decreasing. So it's only present in the very first few days after infection. And after that, we have the antibody that will remain over time. So the molecular testing is not a replacement of the PRNT. Both of them are required. Yes, PCR can be used for confirmation, but PRNT is still required for samples that are collected a little bit after symptoms. So, thank you.
Thank you. Important specifications there. Maurice, would you like to make a comment on this topic?
Yes, thank you, Gray. It's exact the point that Jean-Francois just raised. I want to add that the PCR is very sensitive as far as transportation of sample is concerned. So if you take sample from a remote area, by the time they reach the national lab, if they are not transported in respecting the cold chain, you may have fast negative PCR, which doesn't mean that it's not a yellow fever cases. So it's very important to combine the two, and the serology remains the gold standard for the surveillance in Africa. PCR will come as an additional test, but we remain on serology because surveillance is very difficult in the context of Africa. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice, for sharing your expertise. Moving on, we have a question for Frederick, I believe, about the vector control response strategies. Have you shared these, or do you plan to share these with countries?
Thank you very much. No, we haven't shared those yet. We're still finalizing the report, and we've just received additional input from our colleagues at the NTD department, Raman Velayudan from WHO, and from Florence Fouque at TDR, who have really given their expertise. So we're just incorporating these before submitting it to the EYE Secretariat for final approval. But obviously, once it has been finalized and approved, we're more than happy to share it with every interested stakeholder, either through the EYE channels, but also through the Global Vector platform. Over.
Thanks, Frederick. So that just shows we're getting the latest and the newest information. Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentations. This brings us to a little break. We have, I believe, 10 minutes off. So we will see each other at 5 minutes to the hour. That's 16:55 in Geneva. And just calculate 10 minutes from now, wherever you are. Thank you, everybody, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome back, everybody. We'll give a minute or two for people to return from their break. Hope you managed to get up and stretch your legs, get some coffee, drink some water. Let's see. Do we have Andrew Ball available? Andrew Jones, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Hi, Andrew. Andrew's the principal advisor and chief of the Vaccine Center of the UNICEF Supply Division. Welcome, Andrew. You'll be chairing our next session, which is a talk with vaccine manufacturers, so a very important piece of the puzzle. And it's a 30-minute session, and we have 5 speakers along with Andrew, so time is short. I'll be online to help move things along if needed, and I'll turn my camera on when we're nearing the time limit for each of the speakers. Hope that helps, and over to you.
Great. Thanks very much. Before we turn it over to the suppliers, I just thought I'd mention a few quick things. I wanted to particularly thank, I think we have, as you said, 5 suppliers who are going to be presenting today, and then we'll hope to have a brief discussion after. I'd certainly like to applaud the commitment of the suppliers who are going to present today and who've been engaged on the overall eye strategy. You know, we've seen, as you've heard, I think previously in the annual meeting, we've seen an increased production and availability of yellow fever during the last 10 years. Manufacturers have been flexible, agile, and fast response to outbreaks. And so, you know, those are all really important as we start to look forward. I think all of you who are about to present were asked to talk about 3 areas. A brief recap of your support to date and what you've done, a high-level projection of your production and supply availability for both Africa and South America for about the next half decade, 5 years. The impact of COVID-19 on your production or any other impacts that you've seen as a result of lockdown. I know that's something we're following closely at Supply Division. We haven't seen, certainly on the broader set of routine vaccines, have not seen a huge impact, but certainly are very, very vigilant to that. And so I'll turn it over to each of the suppliers to present. And then I think on that conclusion, we can open for questions to the panelists. So over to Biomageneus to present first.
Hello, good day. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Anne Bonfim from Biomageneus, from Market Relations Department. And it's a pleasure to be attending to this event, sharing some information from our institute and attending to this very important forum. Next one, please. Starting by some general overview from Biomageneus engagement with the yellow fever vaccine scenario in terms of global and national demands. We have supplied over 106 million doses until this moment through the UN agencies since the vaccine was pre-qualified in 2021. In attendance to 75 countries in 4 different continents. And in Brazil, only in the last 5 years, we had supplied around 176 million doses to national demand. As most of you know, Fiocruz is a public institute, and our main focus is to attend public national demand. Next one, please. In terms of production projection for the next 5 years, we have some projects in process in terms of internal priority with actions directly supported by our board in terms of increase Biomanguinhos capacity for both presentations. We produce 5 and 10 doses in around 25% per year. In actions which are being or already implemented to optimize some of our production processes in terms of shift works, packaging and labeling capacity increasing, and also reduction for the yellow fever vaccine reach time in around 30%. And this process will allow us an overall availability of batches produced per week and so per year. It's for short-term actions, and in terms of mid-term processes, we have the new camp under construction in Santa Cruz, in the city of Rio de Janeiro, which will be the biggest immunobiological facility in Latin America, and which expect to have it established on 2025 with an estimated capacity around 8 million doses for yellow fever vaccine annually. And in terms of international tenders for the next coming years, we recently attended to UNICEF and PAHO recent requests for proposals in the contracts in which we'll supply until 2024. And all these short-term processes directly affect the increased capacity in which we considered the offers for both agents, and which will allow us to supply Africa and American regions for the next coming years. Next one, please. And in terms of an overview on the impacts of the COVID pandemic in a perspective, in a production perspective, we have our 5-dose facility, yellow fever facility, fully dedicated to the COVID vaccine production since the last year. So we are not producing the yellow fever in this presentation to the Ministry of Health during 2020 and 21. And with a current forecast to establish this production on the second half of 2022 in terms of production impacts. And in a supply perspective, as you well know and discussed during this forum and others, we of course noted substantial delays on especially during 2020 on delivery of the vaccines, especially by the impacts on freight costs and absences of regular global flights. And of course, with possible impacts for campaigns and outbreak responses with the variance noticed between initial forecasts by the countries and the possibility to attend them. Next one, please.
Caroline, just a reminder of the time. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it's my last slide. Just in terms of development, we have 2 processes ongoing in terms of removal of antibiotics and development of a 2-dose vial presentation. Thank you for your attention and the opportunity to share some information from Biomanguinhos with you all. Thank you.
Great. So I think we're on to our next, Chumacov. I'll turn it over to you. I think we have Alexandra and Andrew from Chumacov presenting. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes. We hear you. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am Andrew Malkin from Shumakov Center, Moscow. Dear colleagues, first permit me to express my sincere gratitude to the speakers for the interesting presentations through all the 3 days, as well as to the I team for their perfect arrangements. First slide, please. The first slide represents a short history of our yellow fever affairs within our post-pre-qualification period with rather sustainable plate of capacity levels during 3 recent years. Next slide, please. This is a distribution of our production and supplying activities related to the vaccine through this year, including maintenance of half of the annual WHO emergency stockpile with, just a few days of pre-shipment readiness. This year is still ongoing, and you can see about 1.4 million doses to be supplied before it is over. Next slide, please. This is our secret of almost twofold increasing the production capacity within a 5-year retrospective, without enlargement of facilities and without implementation of new...
Andrew, sorry, apparently the interpreters are having a hard time hearing you. Could you, is there any way you can make the sound clearer? Maybe wear the headset?
Excuse me?
There's a problem of sound. You aren't very clear.
What about now?
It's better, but I think every time you move your finger even slightly, we hear the movement. Is there... Now we don't hear you.
Yes. You can hear me now?
I think it was better when whatever you were doing before was better.
Yes, excuse me for the inconvenience. This is our secret of almost twofold increasing the production capacity within a 5-year retrospective, without enlargement of facilities and without implementation of new equipment. Since 2017, we just implemented 2-shift working day, first as a 6-month pilot project, and then expanding it actually through the whole year. From the other hand, the diagram shows that there is a certain bottleneck between the bulk production and formulation into primary containers. Next slide, please. It is obviously now that the maximum production capacity using the existing facilities and equipment is already reached, and just an insignificant increase at a rate of no more than 15% may be feasible due to maximum optimization of the working schedule and mobilizing all the available technical resources. Next slide, please. To overstep this constraint, we have started a technical renovation a few years ago, and a new aseptic filling premises equipped with a high-speed filling line, along with 2 freeze dryers, has been designed, equipment purchased, constructed, validated, and everything was finalized till the date. Besides that, since the end 2019, we launched some strengthening of our seedlot system, basing upon the same WHO-sourced 70D strain, to make the system much reliable and much efficient. Also, our project to switch filling of multi-dose vaccine from ampoules to vials is now closer to its finalization. Next slide, please. However, the pandemic situation has been making some corrections to our production plans since 2020. Particularly, being a federal center for development of vaccines, we had to do our best, including manpower and finances, to develop extremely shortly a new coronavirus vaccine, conduct its preclinical and clinical studies, pass through the local licensure procedure, implement it into production, and scale it up as soon as possible. It has been finally done without any outside investments at our own expense, by the way. Besides that, our new filling facility has been mobilized by the government decision and rededicated for processing our new COVID vaccine, fortunately for a while. The increase of production expenses due to growth of pricing for raw materials, reagents, spare parts, etc., because of the global crisis, should also be mentioned among the COVID-sourced impacts. All the rest seems to be controllable and hopefully overcomable. I would like to underline in conclusion that we do not refuse of our earlier plans to increase considerably the production capacity in terms of yellow fever. We have almost prepared another filling line more relevant for the liquid COVID vaccine, and we are going to perform a replacement and return the specially dedicated facility back to our yellow fever project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thanks very much to Chumakov. I think now we're going to the Institut Pasteur de Dakar. I believe Antoine will be presenting.
Yeah, I try to connect with my camera, but it do not turn off. So to turn on. So I'm sorry. Okay, this is a pleasure to attend the 5th I meeting, and I will present some slides related to IPD's main projects. No, next slide, please. Okay, so I will present some slides related to IPD's main slides, IPD support, production focused, and COVID-19 main challenges we faced. Next slide, please. So regarding the first project called the GARAP project, this is linked to the current yellow fever facility. And the main objective of this project are to maintain the current facility until 2023 in order to secure vaccine production up to the starting of the new facility, to increase capacity in the drug substance and the drug product, and also to anticipate the coming Annex 1 in order to integrate changes like the use of isolator or open wraps for vaccine production to better secure our production. Regarding the second project, next slide, please. Yeah, so regarding the next project called Africa-Maril project, this is a project related to the construction of a new yellow fever vaccine facility. And this is related, this is called Africa-Maril, and this is located in Diamniadio, a new city not far from Dakar. And as you see now, this is where we are today, and hope that this project will be ended in 2023. Next slide, please. So regarding the support, we get different grant fund from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Could you come back, please? Yeah, okay. So you get different funds from different grants from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And for the last project called GARAP 2, we implemented with the support with PAF and AGH. Next slide, please. Regarding the volume, so regarding the volume, we have already booked LTA with UNICEF for supply of from 2022 to 2023, and for quantity of 4.6 million doses. There will be 10 million additional doses in 2024 that will come from the new facility. In 2025, the quantity will be 20 million, and in 2026, the quantity will be 30 million. Next slide. So when we talk about COVID-19 impact, the main challenge we faced was related to the delay on equipment construction and difficulties to run some factory acceptance tests. Other challenges we faced was related to equipment transportation and partners travel limitation, which linked to equipment commissioning and qualification delay. But hopefully, we are at the end of the process and will start soon the production. Thank you for your attention.
Great, well, thank you for the very succinct presentation. So now we can go on to our next presenter.
Thanks, Andrew. So good afternoon, good morning. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So let me first introduce myself, Annabelle Monet, working at Sanofi Pasteur as Global Vaccine Public Affairs Leads on dengue and travel endemic vaccine, including yellow fever vaccines. So I'm presenting today on behalf of Sanofi Pasteur's team, and I do want to thank the organizing team to have offered us the opportunity to present today. So before going into the details of the slide, I would like to comment that this is my first IE meeting, and I'm really impressed by the achievements and the engagement at all levels. And I feel really pleased and honored to be part of this fight. So as you might have understood, I'm quite new in this fight, but if you move to next slide, Sanofi Pasteur as a company is committed to the international fight against yellow fever for more than 60 years. And we delivered 500 million doses since 1953. As Sanofi Pasteur joined the IE initiative in 2016, and we are committed to routing programs and preventing mass vaccination campaigns, as well as to the global emergency stockpile. We are continuously investing in quality, regulatory compliance, capacity increase through facilities improvements, as well as innovation and R&D. Indeed, we are furthermore investing in a new generation vaccine, moving from the egg-based platform to a VeroCell platform. And this is a true innovation Sanofi Pasteur is progressing on. Next slide, please. So Sanofi Pasteur Yellow Fever is making a yellow fever vaccine available for UNICEF in Africa and for PAO in South America. We supply WHO pre-qualified vaccines shown to be safe, highly effective in population living in endemic areas, but also for international travelers. This is a high-value vaccine with only one food dose providing lifetime protection, and which is also programmatically straightforward. Coming now on the supply, we would like to take the opportunity of today's meeting to really thank partners for their efforts to give better visibility on upcoming demand. And through the quarterly informational update for the yellow fever manufacturers, and of course also through the 4-year UNICEF and PAO tenders. So as of today, the supply meets the demand. Sanofi Pasteur produced and delivered the requested quantities. If we look at 2021, we were awarded for 33 million doses, including stockpile by UNICEF, and for 46 million doses as an LTA extension of 2020 for PAO. So that means a total of 37.6 million doses for 2021. For upcoming years, by 2024, we were awarded for 33 million doses per year, including stockpile for UNICEF, and we are still awaiting the answer for the PAO tenders. And so after 2024, we do want to insist on the need for some further discussions with partners due to supply over demand expected post 2025. That means for the next 4-year tender. And this is really crucial to secure our supply capacities, but also to secure our position as a company in this market, especially due to the current investments in our new generation of yellow fever vaccine. Next slide, please. So last, we were requested to comment on the impact of COVID pandemic on production capacities. So first, Sanofi Pasteur secured to maintain our production and supply capacities despite the pandemic and including lockdowns. However, we do want to point out that supply of raw materials, components, consumables, specifically single-use technology where lead time availability has been extended, are becoming tight and need urgently to be secured and sustained for the mid-long term. And in this context, we do want to re-insist on the need to even further align between demand and real procurements. We noticed some discrepancies, especially in the PAO region, between the demand and the true procurements from the country. So really, we really want to re-emphasize this need for this alignment to secure our supply capacity and thus to secure our our contribution to the fight against yellow fever. So thanks again for the opportunity to present today, and over to you, Andrew.
Great, thanks very much, Annabelle. And now we're moving to the Serum Institute of India as our last presenter.
Yeah, good afternoon to all. I'm Milan Ganguly from Serum Institute of India, with an objective to eliminate yellow fever epidemics globally. Serum Institute of India has developed a yellow fever vaccine, and it is still under development. Next slide, please. I will share the current status of our product development through this slide. It's a live attenuated freeze-dried vaccine containing the yellow fever virus 17D strain. The diluent that will be used is water for injection. We have 3 dose presentations. One is single dose, another is 5 dose, and another is 10 dose in amber color vials. The emphasis of production will be on 5 dose and 10 dose, keeping in mind the mass vaccination. The single human dose volume will be 0.5 ml. The storage temperature of the vaccine will be 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. We have completed the VVM study, and the VVM assignment is VVM 14. The expected shelf life is 36 months. The stability study is ongoing, though some of the early batches have already completed the shelf life in real-time storage. The label claim is as per WHO and pharmacopoeial requirements. Next slide, please. Just the slide before. Yeah. The timeline achieved and expected. We have completed our phase 1 clinical trial in June 2021. The initiation of phase 3 clinical trial in Africa, it is expected in Q1 2022. The phase 3 clinical trial is expected to be completed in Q3 2023. We will be applying for licensing in India, and after the we will then apply for the WHO pre-qualification by Q1 2024, and we expect WHO pre-qualification by Q3 2024. So we will be ready with the product by Q3 2024. Next slide. Thank you. The expected availability for Africa and South America for the next 5 years, that is our projection. As year 22 and year 2023, that will be that will involve the phase 3 clinical trial and the clinical trial completion. As we will be ready with the product by 2024, that is our expectation. So we can probably supply 10 to 15 million doses as the supply is expected to start by Q4. A new bulk manufacturing facility is coming up with 50 million doses, which will be qualified and will be ready for manufacturing by Q2 2023. So from 2025 onwards, we could be able to supply 50 million doses per year. The supply is expected to continue at 50 million doses or higher per year beyond year 2026. We can augment the capacity if there is a bigger demand in the market, and obviously we look forward to that. Next slide. To discuss about the COVID-19 impact on the supply projection, we don't have any impact, so-called impact of COVID-19 on projected timelines at SIIPL. Our clinical trial is going on as per schedule, but we have factored in the impact of COVID-19 into the clinical trial timelines. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, everyone was very timely on their presentations. What I'd like to do now is open up for questions. Sorry, Shagun, did you want to come in there?
No, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to see if we could open up for questions. I think all the suppliers covered quite a range of issues there. So maybe I'll give a minute to see if people want to put up their hands or ask a question in the chat. I don't see any. Hey, while
they come in, I have a question, which is what's the future of the yellow fever vaccine looking like? Andrew, I don't know who you want to address this to, but just to hear it from the horse's mouth, what the future looks like, just briefly.
Yeah, maybe we can start. I mean, maybe start with our last presenter, since they have a product still in development, and then can let others also answer that question.
Can you please repeat the question?
She was asking about the future of the market, how you see the future of the market evolving as a manufacturer. What's your sort of perspective on how the market is going to evolve, and I guess the implication might be what challenges or questions might you have about how that market's evolving?
The very objective of the I strategy is that to eliminate the yellow fever epidemics globally. So basically, the right perspective for this yellow fever vaccine is to increase the capacity globally, to properly vaccinate where it is needed, and then probably we have to see what kind of impact the correct kind of supply may have on the future course of disease progression.
Annabelle, did you want to come in? I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. Yeah, just if I may, at least on our side, we are a bit concerned about the future. And specifically about the point I raised during my presentation, that means the oversupply expected compared to the demand. And it's even more true when we look at all the presentation today, when all the increased capacities from each of the manufacturers were raised. So that's really a concern, and we really think there is a need for some further discussions with partners on these points. So I don't know if someone wants to further comment or what kind of action can be taken to follow up on that, but we do think that's a real concern that should be further discussed for sure.
Sorry, I'm just seeing a question in the chat, but I think that's regarding something else. Okay.
Thank you, Annabelle. Just given the talk of, given the COVID pandemic and all that we hear about the supply chain and the issues surrounding, there's always some ingredient that's in short supply. I know the last presentation said that the yellow fever vaccines were safe, there was no issue, but maybe if any of you have been facing any issues, if you could share them with us, if it's something maybe WHO partners in the eye strategy can help with, that would be very great. So just maybe if you could elucidate a bit on supply chain issues. Thank you.
Can I actually expand that a bit? And you sort of touched on this with your question, Annabelle, to ask each of the presenters is, I think in some of you touched a little bit about the partnership and what the partnership's done, the links to your production. What might be helpful to hear, more broadly, is what you think could improve or what changes you might make to the eye partnership from the manufacturing perspective, right? I think that's been touched on a little bit, but where do you see that the partners collectively could be more helpful or do things in a different way that might enable you to deliver better? So maybe what we'll do is go through each of the presenters to sort of address that. Maybe since Annabelle, you still have your hand up, I'll let you start and then I'll go through the others in turn to talk about that. Impressions again of how you see the eye partnership and strategy and where might you change or improve it. Thanks.
Oh, sorry, I was still on mute. Thanks for the question. I think the eye initiative is really a good platform to further collaborate and discuss. We are in the initiative since 2016, so and we really see the power of such an initiative. But yeah, we would really like to leverage on this partnership and with the power of this partnership to address this particular concern for us if it's possible. So I don't know if we could plan. So I know we raised this point also in the annual ICG meeting, and an action was taken, and we say that maybe it could be a topic for the eye meeting. So that might not be the place for this annual one, but maybe have some particular discussion forum outside of this meeting would be great. Thanks a lot.
Why don't I turn over to Chumakov next, Andrew, if you want to address that on changes or improvements you might want to see to the partnership.
Thank you very much for the question. We are planning to enlarge our yellow fever vaccine production. So during the next run of the negotiations with UNICEF, additional quantities could be discussed. From the other hand, we have some negotiations with PAHO. So maybe we expand our supplies to Americas.
Okay. Maybe I can turn over to Bjorn Mangunius if you want to address that question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, in terms of the strategies for eye group, eye group is a very important channel in terms of discussions of future visibility. But from manufacturers' perspective, it would be real interesting to have some more direct discussions in terms of real expected demand and locations for the country, especially with discussions with PAHO, in which we can note some some initiatives in terms of reallocations for American regions, for Biomanguinhos, for example. It would be very, very helpful to have more direct discussions in terms of expected demand and location for the countries in a long term, in a multi-year terms, I mean. Thank you.
Thanks. And I see we did have, I'm sorry, I missed Zaku's hand was up, I think. So if you want to ask your question, Zaku, and we could see which of the panelists could address it.
Yep, Andrew, yes. Pasteur Institute is keen to discuss every topic. Our normal market is Africa, so if any manufacturer or something, everything that could be done to try to harmonize all of this, we will join this discussion and try to see how all of this will work.
Thanks, Antoine. I was trying to say, I think Zaku Ide, I see, has a hand up. So if you want to ask your question.
I see you're unmuted as well. Please go ahead. While they figure it out, Andrew, we have a question from William in the audience who asks, the timeline for the development of the yellow fever vaccine as presented by the Serum Institute of India looks long compared to what we have seen with the development of COVID vaccines. Is there anything you can do to shorten the timeline?
Yeah, this is Dr. Sajjad Desai, Deputy Medical Director from Serum Institute of India. And I read that question. In fact, I was about to reply to that email. So obviously we cannot compare the development of COVID-19 vaccine with any other vaccine because that was an emergency. And we are developing this vaccine as per WHO TRS requirements. And we have considered these timelines because of COVID-19 pandemic. So if there is any, if pandemic happens, then, these timelines may extend. So considering all the these factors, we have come to a conclusion, but definitely we'll try to bring this vaccine as soon as possible.
I know we have about a minute left, I think, if I'm right.
Well, we have SII on the line, Serum Institute. There was another question, which is what 17D strain are they using in their vaccine? Very technical and specific question. That comes from Erin. Yeah.
And I see Zaku has asked a question in the chat there in French about fractional dosing.
Yeah, Milan from Serum Institute. We are using the WHO primary yellow fever primary strain, and that is of 17D-213 lineage.
And did any one of the manufacturers want to comment on Zaku asked a question about the about fractional dose use?
Yeah. Maybe if I may, we do think that we should respect the WHO position, which is that it should only be used in case of outbreaks and where there is an issue in terms of supply. So we do think that this position should be respected on this fractional dosing issue. Yeah.
Thank you, Annabelle. In the comments, there's a comment addressed at you and at Andrew in agreement with what you said earlier. So I request you to have a look at that. I think we're fine to move on. I'm sorry, it's been a very abrupt session, even though it's such an important topic. We know that the yellow fever response rests on vaccines. Thank you to the manufacturers for making time. Andrew, would you like to say anything in closing?
No, I really appreciated all the manufacturers participating in this, and as you said, Shagun, it felt a bit truncated. I think it's a challenge. It's always a challenge. These things, once the questions start to come in, is right when we have to end the session. So thank you so much to the people who asked questions, and thanks to the suppliers for participating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
I see Raki's turned her camera on, ready for her session. So moving on, we have Raki Verma from the iStrategy presenting to us the country twinning project. Please go ahead. This is an upcoming knowledge sharing initiative. Go ahead, Raki.
Thanks, Shagun. I'll just check that everybody can hear me clearly first. Shagun, can you hear me?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay. Great. Well, look, thanks everybody that's still here. I think we've still got over 100 participants. I'll take it. I'm happy to see you all participating over the 3 days. I put myself last on the agenda, so I appreciate you sticking with us to the end, but it is really quite an important session to help improve our collaboration and learning across the partnership going forward. So many of you will be familiar with the country twinning surveys. I've been pushing it on you for several months. Yevgeny, if we could go to the first slide, please. Thank you. So what is country twinning? First of all, the aim of the iStrategy is to protect almost 1 billion people by 2026. But in the process of achieving that, we also want to help grow the skills and knowledge of people across the partnership. And that's where the country twinning or peer-to-peer learning program is hoping to come in. So by country twinning, we hope to formalize a way of building capacity by sharing best practices and solutions, gaining or increasing practical skills, helping you to expand your global yellow fever network, strengthening strategic approaches, for example, vector surveillance. So a program and a structure or framework whereby you can collaborate between countries and regions or disciplines to learn from each other's experiences, practices, and processes. Next slide, please, Yevgeny. So we sent the survey out to 1,000 people. I had 30 responses, which did make me a bit sad. 100 would have been great. So I'm hoping that this might cause a little rush of enthusiasm to complete the survey. I'm going to leave it open for another week. My colleague Frank is going to shortly put the link in the chat for the survey. It takes about 4 minutes to complete. In terms of the results for the ones that we've had so far, the largest number of responses came from Nigeria, which was expected, and 70% of responses came from the African region. 73% of respondents said that this type of program is extremely important to them. So I do believe it is a priority, and we will welcome your thoughts and views at the end or after this meeting. Next slide, please, Yevgeny. So overwhelmingly, people wanted to, in this order, share best practices and solutions, gain or increase their skills, strengthen strategic approaches, and expand their network. When asked what else the program should cover, we had lots of different responses on surveillance, and I can provide more information on that if needed. Cross-border communication and collaboration, especially during outbreaks, also came up several times, and a common risk assessment strategy. Next slide, please. So how often do you engage with your counterparts to exchange knowledge on yellow fever activities? The majority of respondents, 43%, said you engage annually. We obviously want to try and increase that. 30% are engaging monthly. How does this engagement happen? Largely at the annual meeting, so once a year, or by email. There are some pre-existing forums which happen on a more regular basis, working group meetings, technical forum, and country calls, which also appeared in the responses. Next slide, please. So the previous response on how often people engage, on YF activities was 70% engaging on an annual basis. However, what people would like to do is engage monthly. So there is a gap between how often people are getting in touch with each other and what they would perceive as ideal. When asked about how informed people felt about YF activities of other regions and countries, most people felt somewhat informed. I would say that we do have a lot of information about the activities of countries and regions in our newsletter every month. So my colleague Frank is going to be putting the link for you to subscribe to that. So if you're one of the people who only feels somewhat informed, then I'm hoping you will subscribe and get a bit more information on a regular basis. Thank you. Next slide, please. So priorities for exchanging knowledge, surveillance has come out top, which is not surprising. And in the following order, outbreak response, laboratory immunization, vaccine stock management, which we've heard a lot about today, and cross-disease learning. So for representatives of those working groups and those disciplines, please take note, we may be coming to you in future to help build some exchange or learning into the program. Next slide, please, Evgeny. So the other needs that have been highlighted by the survey is some form of information sharing or knowledge database that exists on a permanent basis with information such as research, reports. Several people asked for lab and surveillance activities, and laboratory lists and contacts also came up a number of times. Now, I do believe these things exist, but there may be a need to pull them into an area which is easily accessible for people within the partnership. In terms of how people would like to engage on an exchange program, we've all got used to exchanging online relatively easily over the last couple of years, and people would like to see a combination of online and in-person engagement. I think the online engagement will also help with the next issue flagged up. I can hear an echo, so I don't know if someone can mute themselves, it's just come online, sorry. What the barriers to engaging, the barriers to exchange at the moment, the top answer was funding. So hopefully if we can look to some online exchanges, that might be less of an issue. And obviously people have been focusing on COVID-19 for the last nearly 2 years now. So prioritizing on other diseases over yellow fever also is a barrier to engagement. Next slide, please, Evgeny. So the next steps, and this is my final slide, the survey will be open for another week. The link is in the chat. What do we need to hear from you? We need to hear what else you would like to see, any vision or ask that you have in terms of exchanging knowledge with other countries or regions. You've heard a lot from those countries and regions over the last 3 days. There might be something that particularly piques your interest. Any ideas on how we can move this forward or who we can move this forward with? If you are somebody who's able to offer information or opportunities to learn from your country, to learn from your region or from your discipline, then please get in touch and let us know. And if there are any specific requests to be twinned with another country or anybody else, then again, we would be really, really keen to hear from you. So I will just thank you very much for your time and attention. If there are any hands raised or any questions, I'll just give you 60 seconds to make yourself available. I think people are leaving some comments in the chat. Let me just have a look. I think people are offering opportunities to increase learning. Is there anything, Shagun, that you've picked up that I've missed?
Hi, Raki. I think we have a comment from Celestina, who we spoke to earlier from Nigeria, saying that it would be really interesting to see how this can be operationalized. I think it will be a very good opportunity to increase learnings and partnerships across board. Here in Nigeria, we do this within laboratories, but would be great to also expand beyond the laboratory to other aspects of surveillance. So again, another word for surveillance.
Yeah, it comes up a lot. So thank you, Celestina, for that comment. I think the next steps, once the survey is closed, and if we have any other feedback on how these things can be operationalized within your unit, discipline, country, it's something we need to think through, Celestina, in the next steps, is how can we actually put this into practice now that we know that what people's priorities and needs are. And there was something else in a question that I'm unable to, so I don't know if we have any assistance.
I think that was for a link to subscribe
somebody
to the
leaving.
newsletter.
Okay, yeah. All right.
But,
well, I think on that note, so I will put my email address in the chat. You can get in touch with me if you have any light bulb moments. And Shagun, I will hand back to you and to Jennifer for the final words of the day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Raki. I mean, just to add that we're learning from each other today, but twinning is country twinning exercises are really in-depth learning. You really get to know how a country runs its programs, you get to learn their best practices, get to see their challenges and learn from them. So I hope this works out. I'm sure it would be a great program for everybody here. That brings us mostly to an end of today's program, but we have to kind of summarize everything that we have learned and heard here. And for that very, very difficult task, we have Dr. Jennifer Horton from the iStrategy, who's going to do a roundup and a retrospective of the last 3 days with a vision for 2022. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who's been with us over the past 3 days. Really greatly appreciate the contributions that we've seen. So if we can move to the next slide. So I wanted to kind of just highlight how diverse and how many colleagues we've had participating. And I think it's really quite impressive. We've had more than 150 participants per day for the first 2 days. It was slightly lower today, and I imagine that maybe just a little bit of fatigue. And that's really a remarkable investment for the 3 hours each day. In total, there's been more than 287 participants from 55 countries. We've seen a great diversity of presentations and speakers, ranging from the field level through to visionary prospects provided by senior leadership from Gavi, UNICEF, and WHO. And we've seen highlights of the cross-cutting and collaborative relationships within the iStrategy, which have been remarkable to have shared in this forum. We've also seen great diversity of the expertise in yellow fever, ranging from surveillance to laboratory testing, vaccination issues, vector surveillance, and more. And importantly, we've seen concrete examples of wonderful accomplishments at country level. And you see just a list of a few of those elements here, highlighting Sudan's accomplishment with routine immunization rollout, Nigeria's many accomplishments with the yellow fever laboratory network, as well as with preventive campaigns and outbreak response. Ghana, DRC, and Congo also respectively for great accomplishments with immunization activities. And as we saw today, a very detailed and helpful explanation of the complexity of yellow fever surveillance in a country with robust surveillance structures from Cameroon. Next slide. So to briefly touch on some of the highlights on a daily basis, we started on Monday with an opening by WHO senior leadership, which highlighted the criticality of having a country-focused approach and emphasizing the need for revitalization of actions across the partnership if we are to achieve the I objectives. There was a really strong orientation that epidemics begin and end in communities, so to keep that community emphasis in our hearts and minds with our work. And that global protection systems must have that linkage and must assure that we bring everything back to the communities at center. We saw that there were opportunities to address yellow fever risks across the I partnership working together. This ranged from supporting building of country capacity, for example, as was spoken to by Dr. Chikwe, the great value of having confirmatory testing in countries such as Nigeria. We also heard from colleagues about opportunities to work across integrated health initiatives at global level, such as the Immunization Agenda 2030 and the Global Arboviral Initiative. And we saw some exciting new areas for further exploration to improve our impact, such as the approach of doing bundled service delivery, particularly in fragile, conflict and vulnerable settings. And then we also heard some of the details around importance to address yellow fever specific immunization agenda. From our regions, we heard updates around concrete actions that are being taken to achieve I within each region. In Africa, we heard about the work plan for eye and also around engagement towards risk analysis for moderate risk parts in the Horn of Africa. And in the Americas, exciting updates on development of an eye roadmap for implementation and an ongoing country survey. Next slide. On day 2, we were welcomed by an address by Gavi, which profiled the substantive gains that have been achieved through the yellow fever laboratory diagnostics and called for an intensification in action to maintain and restore routine immunization, including in contexts where there's been negative impact from COVID-19, as this is the #1 way to protect against yellow fever outbreaks and assure that all people everywhere are protected. We were able to welcome a diversity of country colleagues, speaking to their experience implementing yellow fever control strategies in the COVID-19 context. The importance of country ownership and leadership was highlighted, as was the reality that COVID had a massive disruptive impact and continues to add complexity to operations, but also offers opportunities in terms of addressing misinformation and in terms of delivery of integrated services in some contexts. We saw, again, highlighted the importance of risk communication and community engagement as a key to success for immunization activities. And we saw some creative solutions that had accomplished overcoming great logistical challenges. And we also heard about challenges such as the negative impact that is foreseen in some countries, Cameroon and Nigeria, both highlighting the impact of polio rampdown, particularly on surveillance and response structures. From our eye working groups, which provide technical and operational support to the eye strategy, we heard some exciting developments, and just a few are listed here. And this is by no means complete, but we did hear about a newly endorsed national risk analysis tool, new horizons for laboratory diagnostics, the improved yellow fever vaccine supply, which was further complemented by the sessions with thanks to the vaccine manufacturers today, and around activities looking at vaccine delivery and opportunities to further improve specific issues around yellow fever vaccine coverage. If we move to the next slide, on day 3, UNICEF has provided us a nice opening and provided, again, a motivating message emphasizing the need to sustain routine immunization and encouraging all partners to work together, really emphasizing that it's together that we are stronger and can ensure that no one is left behind. We've seen updates on progress and resources for surveillance, outbreak response, and urban risk. And we've also seen updates on yellow fever support, such as the improved yellow fever vaccine supply, which we've already mentioned. And again, a thanks to all who participated in this recent and very interesting session around urban risk and preparedness and response, which is an exciting initiative, and we'll be hearing more about this in the future as we have simulation exercise activities planned, and around country-to-country peer support through the Country Twinning Project. So in terms of vision for the next steps, we've heard loud and clear, if we move to the next slide, sorry. So in terms of next steps, and again, I think this is coming full circle to where we started really, but we've seen that yellow fever prevention and control cannot wait. And indeed, this was the impetus for creating the eye strategy some years ago. The yellow fever issue needs to remain high on our agendas to leverage opportunities and mechanisms that can contribute to us achieving the end goal of the eye strategy. And we need to work together to seize opportunities in order that this strategic objectives of the eye strategy be achieved in a timely manner by 2026. And if we go to our next slide, and again, just highlighting some of the critical challenges ahead of us for the final 5 years of the strategy, is that as we've seen represented through the presentations and discussions, there are growing concerns about immunity gaps, as were highlighted by our regional colleague, Dr. Blaise today, of the risk that this can pose in areas with intense virus circulation, and that this may contribute to future outbreaks in more areas, including those that have had a history of prior campaigns. So in order to detect early and respond rapidly, there is this need for community-based surveillance that is active in the field that can help rapidly identify these outbreaks and help ensure preparedness. We also have opportunities towards using outbreaks systematically to build synergies both across outbreak-prone diseases through the ICG mechanisms and beyond, and to look at ways to support and sustain recovery mechanisms, for example, in areas where there are immunity gaps uncovered. And we've seen that yellow fever outbreaks are often occurring in areas where interventions may require, may be complex, may involve populations who are displaced or mobile, and thus we must open ourselves to exploring how to be more innovative and offer tailored approaches to reach everyone who requires a yellow fever vaccination. And this includes working towards the prevention, preparedness, and response activities, and towards providing bundled services. If we move to the next slide. And then finally, to address emerging and re-emerging risks, the Yellow Fever and I partnership needs to continue at an accelerated pace our work towards prevention with a synergistic vision, working across areas of expertise and across initiatives at all levels. We need to face the risk of the resurgence of yellow fever outbreaks in areas with histories of campaigns and come up with solutions that can address this risk before these outbreaks happen. And we need to understand with better granularity and find mechanisms to address yellow fever specific immunization issues in routine immunization systems. In terms of ensuring that, that our activities can be sustained over time, we want to leverage opportunities through other global partnerships, including Immunization Agenda 2030 and the Global Arboviral Initiative. So I'd like to thank everyone who's participated. Your continued engagement and participation with the Yellow Fever Agenda and the I strategy is integral to our success. And we do plan, in fact, for a midterm evaluation, and we'll welcome engagement also on this. And use this as a way to guide us in the final, in the second half of the I strategy's implementation through 2026. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who stayed online through these 3 days. Thank you for joining all these sessions. We look forward to your ongoing engagement, and we'll remain in touch over the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I'm adding my thanks also to the interpreters. I know it's past 6. It's a thank you very much for all your work today, and to all the participants and the presenters for sharing their time and experience with us. So thank you very much, and see you next year. We have the links to all the presentations and the link to subscribe to the newsletter, and we hope to stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Para